this is the start of winter. It's going to get way colder in the middle of July. All right, this is where we are right now. And it's not good enough for the partisan game of the new government to say, oh, it's all the old government's problem. No. It is a collective brain snap which has been going on for a political generation, Matt.
And exactly right, Paul. And there's a good point there made about the winter only going to get worse, but it's also the case that summer is even more demand in Australia, whether it's global warming or what have you. On hot days, they are actually our peak periods in January, February, usually. So if we don't fix something and fix something fast, things could get a lot worse for our country. I think I said a few weeks ago that what we need to do is buy as many diesel gensets as we can right now. That's probably our only short-term solution. It's terrible, but that's what we've got to do to keep the lights on. And let's build a coal-fired power station. Why can't we do that? I mean, what is the argument against doing that now? Snowy 2's been delayed for more years. It's going to not be ready till 2028. Building a coal-fired power station is not going to blow the planet up. They're building hundreds of them overseas. We've got all this great coal here. Why don't we build one? We could build one in a couple of years if we put our mind to it, and then at least we'd have the power. We'd at least have the power. And maybe in 10 years' time, hydrogen comes along or batteries comes along, but we cannot afford to wait. We cannot afford to go cold and people to die over the next few years because we have not planned to have enough power. That is a disgrace. And we need to turn it around.
And that's what will be happening, Paul. Just exactly what Matt says there. Tonight, one of the coldest nights we've had since winter started, there will be heaters turned off. Pensioners will say, I'm not risking it. I don't want to pay this bill. And that will cause them enormous health problems.
Well, and can I just be very clear too, before people want to immediately jump on and start sending off to the umpire this very conversation, have a chat to the new Labor member for Higgins, who talked about people with extreme hypothermia during winter. Remember when they tried to turn around and say that Craig Kelly was making it up when he talked about it? And then, of course, 6 months later, the facts doubled it down. So we'll meet you on the other side of winter. And then you can do your fact check on the other side then, as opposed to screaming about what you think might be about to happen. Now, just quickly, Chris, the point about the OAMs today for these chief health officers, the idea that it was just sort of the automatic pat on the back, the thank you so much for the health system. If they gave one to every nurse in the country, okay. If they gave one to every Wardley who was doing it, if they gave one to every checkout chick who actually had to be there and bloke during the crisis when everything else was shut down but everyone was coughing and spluttering in aisle 3. But instead, we gave it to the very people whose policies we do not know the consequences of when it comes to our kids. I just think it's such bad form. It's so tinny.
As soon as I saw Janet Young's name on that list, I thought, they are kidding, aren't they? She locked down longer than she should have. Queensland were locked down about 4 weeks longer at every single lockdown.
And locked out. People locked out forever.
And sitting at the border, trying to hold each other's hands over concrete barriers where you were broadcasting from, which was hopeless. She, not only that, she downplayed, as you said in your editorial, AstraZeneca, which took the rug right out from the whole vaccine rollout. That was one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why she should never be rewarded. Look, there's no rule book here. There was no rule book that says this is what you do in a pandemic. But if you were scoring her out of 10, you wouldn't give a 4.
No, correct. And never forget, Chris, and I know that these are all just little people that don't matter in the wider, war against COVID. But remember the lady who had twins was close enough to Queensland that's where her nearest hospital was. Instead, she turned around and lost one of those babies because she had to go back to Sydney. What about the family in Lismore whose baby was born and had to go to a NICU but mum and dad couldn't go with, let alone the lady who couldn't go to the funeral, let alone the thousands of Queenslanders who couldn't return home? I get it. There were going to be plenty of broken eggs, but to turn around and start giving out medals to the people partially responsible, I just think it's pretty low form, mate.
Well, Paul, I don't want to take the OAMs completely off the table because I think we could do a deal here. I'm happy to give them the OAMs if we can receive the health advice. Finally, how about that? Why don't we do that deal? You show us all the health advice first. That all this stuff that caused you to lock down, to have vaccine mandates. Show us all that and then the other thing we need to do as part of this deal is have a royal commission. Paul, let's do that. Let's do, because I'm fine. They can put a little pin on their lapel, all great. But you've got to come along to the Royal Commission and tell us what actually went wrong, what was good, and for the next time. Because this is a disgrace not to have a proper inquiry into what happened.
I'm with you. Speed round now. Albo's first cabinet meeting outside of Canberra is going to be in regional Queensland. Are the petals already being thrown at the feet of our new leaders, Matt?
Yeah, people are waiting on bated breath for this. But this is what the Labor Party do. They're not going to build the inland rail to Gladstone. They're actually probably going to scrap the inland rail totally by the look of it. They haven't been committal about building dams up here in central Queensland, but we'll get a meeting. Look, they'll come and grace us with their presence here in central Queensland. We don't need Anthony Albanese to turn up. What we want him to do is get behind dams, get behind rail and infrastructure, and of course, Paul, get behind coal-fired power and guarantee our electricity supply and support our manufacturing industry.
And your comments earlier tonight, Chris, about China were bang on, particularly about how Labor is being tested out. Richard Marles thinks that he's going to sort of achieve peace in our time, full and frank discussions. Do you think the word Uyghur was used once?
No, of course it wasn't. And they won't front up. They won't front up in any meeting that occurs, if another meeting occurs. Bear in mind, the Defence Minister is not in charge of trade, so that won't change overnight. And I didn't see Xi Jinping in that Defence Summit either. So he's the one pulling the levers here. So it's a good step, a positive step, but I tell you what, the papers overplayed it today, big time.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Boring, seriously.
But this is going to be the media tone about everything's historic and amazing about the new broom. This is about how they build up the stock and, inflation, don't worry about it, that's another thing. Don't worry about the power thing. Everything's amazing about this new broom.
Yeah, but look, you know what they're doing. We know what they've just done with all those Pacific Islanders. They've rammed these agreements down their throats. They're signing up there. They've done it very quickly. And at the same time, they're buzzing around and trying to intimidate They did it to the Canadians over Korea, South Korea. I think it was Korea. No, it was in the Korean Peninsula anyway. They've done it to the Australians. We know what's happened there. This is them expanding and trying to create an influence and being in a position to launch from wherever they can in the Pacific if and when there's a conflict over Taiwan. We can see through it, surely, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Lads, thank you so much for the chat.